Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and it's yet another Fun Ideas podcast. We've done at least 200 episodes at this point. Woo! And we're heading on our way to 300. Well, barely, but we'll get there someday. Anyway, we have two guests. We have Kamden Spies has been on too many times to mention in the previous
Sorry.
200 episodes. And we have a brand new guest, but I know about him. I know of his work. It's Orrin Scott. Is that how you pronounce it? I should have asked.
Yeah.
Okay. And you do an animation checklist, as it were, of like every animation book ever made ever. And I see you have a goodly selection by a certain author behind you. So tell me a little bit about those books.
No,
let's see if you have
absolutely.
all my animation books.
Oh
Anyway.
no, not yet, unfortunately.
I don't either.
Once Kamden was kind enough to let me know that you were thinking of letting me have the privilege of coming on, I had to quickly order some important ones to get
You didn't have any
eat
of
them real fast. I didn't end up getting through all of them, but I did end up checking out Pac-Man and learned quite a bit. So, but yeah, I've been working on the Animation History Bibliography on Cartoon Research for the last. It launched, let's see, March of last year, but I've been working on it since probably about March of 2020. That was the third month, right when about a month into the COVID-19, when I realized I got to get into a big old project. I have an opportunity here. So from that point, I kind of pulled a couple books off and started going to town researching. And ever since then, anything that has any sort of referential or importance for animation, how other fields have come across animation or production or any see, it's been kind of challenging because that little line in the sand of where animation stops and other disciplines begins gets a little more challenging the deeper in the weeds you get. So
well,
you get into comic strips and film, and that's why I came to Orrin. I'm like, what if we had a comic strip bibliography? And you were all for the idea. And then I asked Tom of Hogan's Alley.
Tom Heinches.
And he's all for it too. But apparently his webmaster has died.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is that Dean?
That's too bad.
No.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking of a different person. Okay, never mind. Okay.
Dean Mulaney you're thinking of?
No. Never mind. I don't want to say somebody's dead when they're not. I've done that before. I did that in that Total Television book there. Anyway, I was going to ask you, Orrin, so you kind of alluded on it. It's like, so where's the line drawn? I mean, if a book's all about, say, Pogo, and the whole book is about the comic strip, and then the last chapter talks about the Chuck Jones special and the claymation special, is that considered an animation book, or is it just like, well, it's just a couple chapters in the book?
For a while there, I was only doing books that were explicitly on animation. And then when I started coming across more and more books that had a chapter or two chapters devoted to the subject, I would throw those on what I was calling kind of a periphery bibliography, where the focus wasn't necessarily on animation completely. Ralph Bakshi has a great one chapter article about blaxploitation that was written in the late 80s, but it's only one chapter of one book. So it's been I'm trying to keep those in line as well as we move, as it kind of lets the project dictate its boundaries to me, if you will. But it's also been kind of a give and take, because at first I would argue that the Disney theme parks, as awesome as they are, goes more into mechanical and engineering and theme park studies and not animation. And that was something I kind of left out when I first launched
Didier Guess has his own website that you can find all those books.
And which is something you told me about a couple recently, actually. But the more I thought about it, without the theme parks, you wouldn't have the decisions that Disney made. And without Disney, if you subbed in, let's say, Warner Brothers or any other distributor of animation or known for it, would we approach it the same way? And once I started changing the context and asking myself those questions, and it was like, okay, now I have to include those books a little bit, at least the ones that are historically important, because they are. I mean, there's a point when Disney, one could argue, Disney goes from being theatrical exclusively to being a theme park company. I mean, and when that transfer happens, go ahead.
I know that you told me that we were talking about something like you said there's also a moral high ground too. Like for example, I don't know who it is, but who she is still alive. She was Chuck Jones's secretary, and until she got into a car accident or something and became blind. She recently wrote a book, and obviously that book's in the bibliography. I don't know who what her name is. I actually have the book somewhere. You know
I
which one I'm
remember
talking
the one
about,
you're
right?
alluding. I remember alluding to that one, but I don't remember it off the top of my head, unfortunately.
But yeah, which is really embarrassing because she's still with us.
Hmm.
Um,
There's some.
or like because obviously that goes into like a moral high ground because obviously the whole book is about something else, but the losing and then she became this, so it almost is entirely about animation in its own way.
Well, Mel Blanc's engineer, whose name unfortunately escapes me off the top of my head as well, wrote an
Yeah,
awesome book talking about being an engineer for Mel Blanc. And, you know, where's that
right,
line? I would argue that's
right.
absolutely someone I want to hear a perspective of, even though he never put pencil to paper and drew necessarily. So it,
Yeah.
now I'm approaching philosophy. Like I've got a whole bunch of a list
Well,
of like a dozen philosophy books, and it's one of those like
wi-
these aren't necessarily history, but it's another discipline wrestling with it. And psychology is one of those things that doesn't need any need anything, so they could just write anyway. So
and I
it's
share with you Thomas and Andre's Walt Kelly book,
mm,
which has it besides the chapter in the Pogo special, what was really context that was useful more that I directed you towards was the 3 chapters in the book for like the first 30 pages, 30 or 40 pages was just on Disney. Which I believe you even put in the bibliography or you were going to.
my to-do list at this point's kind of split across quite a few areas because unfortunately as I wrote a blog post a couple months ago for Cartoon Research and talked about all the podcasts and all the wonderful interviewees that recent podcasts have been getting on. And exactly, and it's hard not to look at that material that's been, I mean, you're talking first source, primary source material, great interviews, and none of it's in books yet
Right.
Yeah.
until we make people aware of it, which is why we're building the resource. And
Right.
Kamden and I have been speaking about how to he at first when he brought up mentioned a web ring back like during the 90s 56k days of a reference of where all the websites would link to one another. And I remember there being great resources for websites, but uh, now that the archive.org has gotten so much better at archiving things, and it now is getting closer to the time to start making sure we don't lose information on older servers or 56k websites. I mean, it all starts to get kind of bigger and bigger the more you look at it.
Yeah. And I understood where your high ground is because Mark, for reference, I've been working with him on a web bibliography.
Uh-huh.
And you get into this moral high ground of I don't see the research value in a website built for publicity. What value does Tara Strong's website do? I've interviewed Tara Strong. She's a nice lady. She's a nice woman.
Yeah.
She's very friendly.
Yeah.
But what good does her research do? And I was like the only 2 voice actors that I could see any moral research value were Walter Tetley's fan website
Mhm.
and Bob Bergen's website because of all the audio links that he has with like ASIFA events from the 1970s or interviews with Dawes Butler or June Foray or
Yeah.
Mel Blanc or audio clips of Bill Scott and June Foray performing at ASIFA or I think he has a few interviews with Joe Barbera on his website that he just happened to collect over the years when he was in his teens, right?
Yeah. I mean,
So
I agree with you. Like if Tara Strong, I haven't really looked at her website, but if it's just about her and nothing really about any voices she's ever done or any work she's done related to animation at all, yeah, it's really just not it's really on the real outskirts of everything, unless you just want to include it because she's a voice actress, but do you get a lot of flack, Orrin, on anything? I mean, yeah, I figured. Why did you put that book, or why did you put that book?
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
My philosophy about that is as long as it's a good effort, I mean, as long as it's not just complete and utter baloney, I think
you have one book on there that I continually argue with you about.
What's that one?
I do. Go ahead.
What's that one?
Hollywood's Dark Prince.
Oh, well, I would include it, but I'd also put a disclaimer that it's factually incorrect in many spots.
I think having the books that aren't necessarily up to par is just as important to know. You need to read garbage to know what is garbage. Yeah. I hated it that it's that way, but
it's
seems unfair not to list. Go ahead.
The problem is it's intentionally lying.
That
author is intentionally making
value in of itself. Like, someone doing that is valuable in and of itself.
I have that book on my shelf. I love that book.
I do too.
I know it's wrong. I would not recommend it be your first Disney book to ever read.
I have the book too because I bought it at a thrift store. I found when I read it, I found every lie to be so. Well, first of all, I don't honestly believe how people can believe it. I honestly don't understand. It is almost making fun of the myth of Disney itself. It's that bad. Because
you know what it reminds me of is, and you may not have seen this. Are you a Beatles fan at all, Kamden? I forgot.
A little bit.
Okay. Years ago, this guy did this paperback called Paperback Writer. And if you could probably find a copy cheap, I think. I don't think it's that collectible. But the guy just like warps the facts around, and it's a very funny telling of the Beatles thing. It was done before the Ruddles, and it's hysterically funny. So if you ever that's what I kind of thought this Disney book was kind of like. It's like it's almost a parody. Although he was so intense on putting his point at home that Walt was 10 years older than he was, and this is his birth certificate. He was born in Mexico or wherever it was, and all that stuff. And it's like, wow,
Yeah, and then there was the JFK thing. That's what really I was like, what do you mean he had to have something to do with the JFK assassination?
It's the books that didn't necessarily get a proofread that really make my heart kind of crack a little bit. Like, you couldn't have even just given it to just one other person, just to have one other person take a peek. But it does. Go ahead.
I know you also got flack for including Wild Minds on there.
Yeah, that was a recent one that came out of it, hit the New York Times and got a big review.
Oh, that one. I'm reading that one now. I think that's fun. But I don't know how accurate it is. It's an easy read. That's the one thing I like about it. Yeah.
I mean, like other people and talking about it, it's not necessarily for people who've been keeping up with it every year. And
I didn't think I checked it out from the library. I didn't think it was as bad as people complained. I didn't think it was very good. I'm not going to buy it, but I also didn't think it was bad.
Well, I found it cheap as a paperback, but I'm reading it just because I'm curious about it. But my honest impression about halfway through it, it's like it's of Mice and Magic written by somebody who didn't read it very well, and is a good nodding, winking, tongue-in-cheek writer. So it makes it really fun to read. So if you're not concerned about that everything's 100% accurate, it's kind of fun to read. Yeah. Because it kind of ties everything in together in a way that Of Mice and Magic didn't. And it almost makes Of Mice and Magic seem a little stodgy, which I'm not going to say it is, because Of Mice and Magic is like probably my top animation book of all time. But anyway,
mine too.
So
mine too. My epiphany book. Everyone your age is epiphany book is Of Mice and Magic.
Yeah, well, it came
mine
out
was Jerry Beck's book, The Hanna-Barbera Treasury.
Yeah. Well, I was
Just when I
already an
bought
old
that
fart
book,
when that one came out. So, the
when I
Mice and
I
Magic
bought,
came out at the exact time. It came out when I was 13, and I was just really getting into wanting to know more about animation than just, oh, I'm watching Bugs Bunny on Saturday morning. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, and there's cartoons on Saturday. I wanted to know what was behind this and why are cartoons now in the 70s and 80s kind of sucking compared to what they used to be. Here's a book. It talks about it all, you know, and it was the right
what
book for the right time. Anyway, so
what made the Hanna-Barbera Treasury stick out though was I was 9. I bought it at a bookstore. I bought 2 books at that same bookstore.
yeah,
I found out later it was at a Borders. I always thought it was at a Barnes and Noble. I found out later because the other book was Brian Walker's book on comics, the complete collection.
Mhm.
I found out later I was at a Borders because Brian Walker says, "Oh, you have the Borders version." So I'm like,
That's
"Yep, I
awesome.
was at a Borders." And I bought both of those 2 books. I pleaded. I was like on hands and knees, like, "Mom, you have to buy me this book. My life depends on it."
My life.
I probably said those exact words. I'm like 9, and I open up this book, and it's like, it was like my epiphany book. Both of them were.
Yeah.
But it was like, and I'm like, what is this stuff? And because before I was like a collector of, you've seen all my toys and stuff like that,
Yeah.
Mark. But it's
Yeah.
like I was like a collector of anything that had the Flintstones on it, I would buy. I'm like, what? I'm like, fuck that. I'm gonna buy only this kind of stuff.
Writing this book has given me a bit of a perspective on all the authors on Cartoon Research, because for a long time my only exposure to what they had done was either through Cartoon Research or other web blogs, and having thinking that there was only probably 80 to 100 animation books, and then slowly finding out that that number was grossly underestimated, and then slowly learning and coming across different authors' research paths over the years. Like, it's been absolutely fascinating to see just how 15 to 20, 25 different authors have helped redefine this and brought it. Like, I was a kid, animation was not talked about. It was on TV. We didn't talk about it. Now it is so much more socially acceptable to not only discuss it, research it, talk about it. And it's now even evolving more and more through AR, all that other jazz. But to see, like, there was never a point so far where I've come across a book, did a Google search, and not found an author tied to this group that has at some point talked about. It's like, I think I'm carving my own path, and here I am still exploring and discovering. It's been like in a sense, like a pseudo master class of like discovering new research, or not new, but again, the research of that everyone's been putting on. Especially with Mice and Magic, it's easier to not find the books that reference it as a useful and important part of this community's involvement.
What do you guys think are the top animation authors?
Well, Didier has put out the most.
Yeah, Didier Guez has put out the most.
You talk page count.
Me.
I don't know. Like, it gets some of the like Frenchie anime, Dr. Frenchie. Her page count's ridiculous with all the academic journals and books that she's been a part of, the dictionaries that she's put together, the guides, and
Oh, I don't know who you're talking about. Can you explain?
Dr. Frenchie, she's a wonderful philosopher, or Dr. Frenchie Lunning. I believe she's from the UK, and I'm going to feel terrible when I get that wrong and find out I got that wrong. She's been studying anime and writing about anime since like as long as early 80s, late. It's been a while, and she's even, her studies have not only the impact of Miyazaki prior to Spirited Away getting big, but also putting in context anime for American audiences while it grew up and blew up during the 90s and aughts. And I don't know, it's really cool to see a lot of these early researchers from the 80s and 90s now at different universities teaching and building the next generations, especially in the UK. I had the privilege last year to go over to Europe and go to the Society of Animation Studies conference, and got to rub elbows with a bunch of these authors and see how Europe is studying animation. And it's simultaneously super exciting and really frustrating, because they're developing great vernacular. They're developing great methods. They're looking at things in ways that we don't. They're very, 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 very serious about it, which is awesome. Don't crack any jokes at inopportune times. But as far as here in the States, it seems like I'm from Indiana. I'm right on the edge to Michigan and Indiana. And while we have a CIFA Midwest here and, radio and advertising in Chicago, it isn't really, it's the East and West coasts. I mean, it isn't even Texas anymore now that Funimation and the anime industry has been booted or bought out, So it's, as far as anybody that dabbles in animation, you've got some visual communication studies around here-ish. I mean, you're really on your own for developing a grassroots animation community. Go ahead.
Orrin, you and I have talked about this before about what I feel about the term cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to agree with a lot. People have criticized on Cartoon Research the Facebook page. When we insult Cartoon Research, we always mean the Facebook page. When we praise Cartoon Research, we always mean the blog. Now,
I've gotten that confused.
So when someone was criticizing Richard Williams' comment that computer animated characters are not cartoon characters, I am one who agrees with that assessment that he says. I consider cartoon characters what a cartoon was meant to be. Hand-drawn. Doesn't have to be on paper, but Superman, Dick Tracy, Bugs Bunny, Homer Simpson, Fred Flintstone, Charlie Brown, those are cartoon characters. Alfred E. Newman, those are cartoon characters. That begs the question, you can't really call it Cartoon Research or the Animation Research Bibliography. It's the Animation, if you called it the Cartoon Research Bibliography, that's when you would get in the ups and downs.
Well, let me ask a bunch of questions because I have a zillion questions here for.
Okay. No worries.
Some are short. Okay, 20 questions. Okay, do you have every book that's on the list?
No, I've got not at all. I've got about 300. That's about it so far.
Do you try to get everyone on the list? Okay.
I would love to be the first one to get it done.
Okay. Do you have difficulties getting books that are in other languages, meaning getting them on the list?
That was one of the first questions when I got over to Europe was why only in English? And the first thing I said to him was because it's all I speak. I mean, it's kind of hard to look another. I've got one French book that I bought this week.
I have books. So you've come to the point where you have books in French that you don't even speak French?
Because I found out my phone auto translates.
Yeah, I have several of those. Preston, I have several of those Patrick O'Brien, Tex Avery books that are in French. He's written like 5 books in French, and I have 3 of them. And
I mean, that would be the French library. Seems like it'd be the one that could be ours. I mean, English probably has the most, but French would probably come in second for.
Thank colonialism for that.
Even over
Japan,
since
the world speaks English.
Even over Japan.
I would assume so because it hits. All of our, I mean, we outpace them 2 to 1.
Really, 1. And really, the only 2 books that are actually translated. There's only 3 books about animation I can think of that have been translated. 4 books. Those 2 major Disney biographies by Gabler and Thomas.
Well, Pierre's books have been translated.
Patrick O'Brien's Tom and Jerry book, and then of course of Mice and Magic.
Oh, you're talking from English into other languages. My apologies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mark, have any of your books been translated?
I don't think anyone could. I don't know. No. I mean, not intentionally. I mean, you could probably put it through Google Translate and probably do it with the ebook version. I don't know. It might work, but
another
I
do have one other question for you, Mark.
Okay.
Orrin and I were talking about audiobooks.
Yeah.
And from our understanding, your book is pretty much the only audiobook.
Which one? The Total Television book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the story about that. So in my first couple books were self-published, and then I did everything through Bear Manor, and most everything since is Bear Manor. when I started working with Bear Manor, the rule was let's get an audiobook because people can't see everything, and let's make an audiobook of everything. Strangely enough, they didn't want me to read my own book, which I thought was odd, and it really frustrated me. I have not listened to that Total Television audiobook in years because I know they mispronounce names and other things that I tried to get corrected, and it really annoys me that it's out there, so I just ignore it that it exists. The only other one they did is a Cracked magazine book, and they messed that one up too. And so ever since,
both volumes of it.
no, they only did volume 1, and that was the end of that. And I volunteered. I said, "Can I read my own books?" And the guy who publishes it said, "Sure, record it." So it's like I have to sit on my own nickel and record something and edit out all the breaths and all the stuff that they do. And I said, I'm not going to do that on my own time. So what I have done, and you've seen it, Kamden, if you look, and Orrin, if you look at my older episodes, I do occasional episode when I have a new book where I'll read excerpts from my book. That's the closest you're going to get to an audiobook written by me, unless somebody comes up to me and says, "Here, do this," because I have a Monkeys book and a co-author named Michael A. Ventrella, who actually was the editor and publisher of Animato years ago. And he just took it upon himself to record all his books and put them on Audible. Unfortunately, he got screwed because Audible gives away everything for free. You can get a free book once a month. So if you're timing it right, you could just literally listen to all his books. He doesn't get a cent out of it. He spent all that time and effort doing them. And I go, okay. So I only do it for my podcast, and I only do excerpts because, it's like I can probably, well, it's hard to do on the Pac-Man thing. I almost read the whole book there. But, and then some of my books are not good ones to do audiobooks on because they're kind of list-like, and so they're not really histories, but that's a whole nother matter. But I haven't looked. I looked like cursory recently, so I said, and I was impressed that you had the Pac-Man book on there. But I mean, I don't know everything you have. So I mean, do you have books about claymation and like the Puppetoons and things like that, if any?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Are there books on the puppet? I know there's the book. Sorry to interrupt. I know there's that book, the films of George Pal. But are there any other books on George Pal?
I believe so. I've got each section subcategorized, so hopefully all the the stop motion, the puppets, each section is by themselves. I have at the bottom of the table of contents page, I also have an index where the whole bibliography is listed in a spreadsheet form. That was actually a really awesome suggestion from Cartoon Research readers. They couldn't figure out a way. They didn't want to go page by page to see if a book was listed, trying to figure out where I put a book. And so having one page be the go-to spot's been super useful. And I use it all the time as well, actually.
Okay, so then shoot, I just lost the one that I was thinking of, if it's on there. But that's good and useful because I was looking on mine and I figured, well, let's see if and I was just seeing if you had just the basic one, the Total Television book, or not even thinking about, the Pac-Man book is an animation book. So let's play catch up since I have all my animation books here. So we got the Pac-Man book. All right. And you got the Alvin and the Chipmunks book.
That I know. I'm going to pull this up on my end.
All right. And you got this one right there. Now, I see you have Harvey Comics Companion. So that was where that question came from. I mean, I do talk about animation in there, but it's basically a chapter. It's mainly about the comic book company. So, I mean.
And we also get into, this is a little bit embarrassing for me because the whole point of me doing this to begin with was there's a lot I don't know. Like just basic stuff from like the 40s to the 60s. I struggle. Like that is just not an era that I've had a lot of time to play with. And also at the end of the day, animation is expensive. Even if we find some of the older stuff, whether Warner Archive puts it out or, whoever puts it out, they're usually done in small batches or they're just a challenge to track down. So, but you're right. There are some books like it's the comics are based on the show, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody's
Well,
done a
I'm
video.
not saying to
Nobody's,
take it off. I'm
yeah.
just surprised
No,
it's
right.
on there. Yeah. Anyway, and then do you have this one, or is that one listed? The Patty Freeling one?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That
Okay.
I know
All
for
right.
sure.
All right. And then my first Disney book, because this talks about the animated features made during those times, so and the live action film. And then this one is like a hybrid too, because I mean it's Dennis the Menace, but it talks about the comic books and the comic strips.
That one I don't have added,
but it does have animation in it because it talks about Curiosity Shop and talks about the Dennis Menace show and everything like that. So there you
Curiosity
go.
Shop, which will be getting a sequel post on Cartoon Research soon.
Cool.
And
with
then,
some very special little snippets that I can't reveal about yet because I've been sworn to secrecy.
And the scrapbook I know I've got in there as well.
Okay, good. All right, so
Scrapbook,
that's everything.
You got to buy in hardback.
I know that. Well, I did. Look.
I know.
Actually, all my books are in hardback now, except for this one. I keep bugging them about it.
Oh.
I want a hardback of this one.
I shocked myself. I actually do have Pocket Full of Dennis the Menace on there. So,
okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
all
hey,
7
how
are
about
on there.
that?
Ha ha!
All right. Okay, so we're all up to date because anything else, I mean, like there were never any Monkeys cartoons. There was never any. I don't talk about Beatles cartoons in my Beatles books, so it's like Cracked Magazine. The closest, and I do talk about this, but I'm not saying put the book on there. I mean, this is they did a show that I'm dying to see, and I'll say again, with Krantz, the people who did Spider-Man and what was the other show that they did in the 60s? Well, that's one of them they did. And they did this show called The Flip Sides, and I don't know how versed you are with Cracked Magazine, but their mascot was this janitor named Sylvester Smith. And or Sylvester P. Smith, I should say. And they made an animated cartoon called The Flip Sides, and I could swear I've seen it before because, like the Total Television book, they would take some of these pilots and just throw them on in cartoon packages, and I could have sworn I saw it somewhere along the line in the 80s or something, just randomly, and wasn't even thinking about being Cracked Magazine. It's just that years later, when I started collecting the older issues of Cracked, and I saw, oh, they're trying to do a cartoon series, I go, I've seen that cartoon. And nobody, Jerry Beck, nobody's like, I've never seen it. So it's like, I can't say that it doesn't exist. It's just they haven't seen it, so
right.
Anyway, but that's in the Cracked book, so that's my animation for that. Right. But I wouldn't say list for that.
Orrin, I got a quick question for you about other Mark Arnold writings that I was wondering if you have.
Sure.
Do you have the issues of Hogan's Alley listed?
I do not.
Do you list magazines in general?
I do.
Yeah, Hogan's Alley magazine listed.
I do.
Because obviously Mark wrote that terrific article that's not published anywhere else about the ABC World of Hand Tools. Mm-hmm. And the post that also my favorite of his, as Mark knows what I'm about to mention, his John Sutherland article.
Which I wanted to make into a book. I mean,
right, which that's circulated a bit, hasn't it? Your proposal for that?
Yeah, back in the day. I mean, it's like we're talking 15 years ago,
right.
So it's like,
I imagine like one of the things I had mentioned to Orrin is like proposed books that have circulated, right? And that was one of them I suggested. I'm like, surely I'm not the only one who's seen this. Like, surely this is spread elsewhere.
I mean,
it's hard to list projects that haven't been duplicated because I don't want to send people down a rabbit hole looking for a book that doesn't exist. Like
right.
Jerry Beck,
which is where the books I sent you, those Chuck Jones books, for example, the one that begs the question, like, is like, how do you find a book that's only 75 of them were made?
Or like Jerry's book that he made for what was it? Turner.
Nickelodeon,
yeah, Nickelodeon, that didn't actually get distribution, but there's copies floating around in the wild, like books that exist. those are on the list. But I mean, I to have an article that talks about important books that haven't been made, because there's been quite a few.
Yeah, I wouldn't list a proposed John Sutherland book because, as far as I'm concerned, that's a dead issue unless somebody wants to revive it. the closest that comes to it is, and he's like a bad taste in the mouth over at Cartoon Research, is that a midi book about
Ooh,
the 50s animation or whatever. You know, he talks quite a bit about Sutherland there. And around the time that book came out, it was about the time that I was supposed to be doing my John Sutherland book, but nobody was really interested, you know, and Bear Manor especially. It's like, and I think he just didn't get it. He didn't know who the guy was. Even with my article, he didn't care, you know. So it's like, well, you know, and the guy's an animation fan. It's just, if you can't convince the publisher, and I wasn't willing to self-publish it, you know, so it's just kind of a dead issue unless somebody wants me to
yeah.
help me revive
I
it.
also there is a moral issue with that with Sutherland too, though, because let's face it, his art is great, but his cartoons are really strict conservative capitalism.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about his theatrical propaganda cartoons, of course, you know, but he did the most important person in the 70s, which, you know, was just like similar to Sesame Street filler, you know. It's like,
Right.
so he did other things, you know, but yeah, I get it on the propaganda thing.
Which
But I
is
mean, I don't know, Orrin, you don't discriminate that way. You'll put anything if it's animation, like, you know, in any
I
field.
try
Yeah.
to. It's
So
because I kind of look at it like it's not my job to judge it.
yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not the expert yet. Hopefully one day I'll get there where I've read them all. But until then, I don't necessarily I
Yeah, I don't
it's like
know,
that
Orrin.
it's
There
like
are
that
some books there
commentary
that you're
warning.
probably never gonna get.
I mean,
Like
I hope
Orrin, I'm gonna tell you right now, that book of 75 that I have that's been that has Chuck Jones, you're probably never gonna get it.
Do I know this book?
No.
Oh, have you shown it
It
before?
was a limited Chuck Jones series that if you bought an art piece.
Hmm.
I bought a Crawford drawing.
You'll have to show me, like, snap a picture of the cover and send it to me just so I can at
Yeah.
least see. Okay. Anyway, so here's the next question. What's considered, through your research, the oldest animation book? And I
Ooh.
know of one that goes way back, but I don't know if that's the first one.
so far the earliest one I believe is still the Walt's the one that the library now I'm gonna blank. How to Make Cartoons. The first one.
I have that how to make
Lutz's cartoon. I
Oh,
believe
okay.
this is still the first one.
Okay.
I have that book.
I haven't come across any others that are earlier than this one.
Now, do you consider anything like, you know, any Walter Foster books that teach you how to draw that might have animation drawings?
So
How to draw 50 greatest cartoons. And it's
Yeah,
like Felix the
that
Cat,
type of stuff. You know, do you
the
consider?
grape. It's like Felix the Cat, the grape ape.
it's challenging because a lot of early animation books are how-to, trying to show people the magic behind the how-tos. And if I were to put every how to make animation book in here, it would be dominated by guides on how-to. But at the
Yeah.
same time, like you've said, there's some really important historical ones we can't not include. So
Right.
it's been, for me, it's
Preston
just
Blair.
been if exactly. So if someone's noteworthy, I've put it in there, and if
Yeah.
I don't know them, that's more of an error on me.
I don't know if this
Eric,
one, I don't know if this one predates that one, but it's from
Mm.
the 40s. What year is that one? The animation one, the one you just showed me.
Yeah,
Next down.
This
Yeah,
one should be 1920.
Oh, that's far earlier.
didn't
Yeah.
Paul Terry write one?
Maybe.
1920.
Okay, that's pretty
I think
early.
Paul
Okay.
Terry wrote one.
So, and there's a bunch of you mentioned periodicals, and periodicals are a bit challenging to track down too, because like books with only one chapter, I want to get articles from like National Geographic. I know that bad example, but like articles in magazines or Popular Mechanics. There's some great ones by Fleischer in the early 30s and stuff.
Yeah.
That would be a great list and resources, but it's it's Pandora's box. There's just so many.
Now, do you at least list fanzines like
Yes,
Mind
absolutely.
Rod or Animato or whatever?
All of them are in there. The
Funny World.
earliest magazine, I think, and I'm probably wrong, but Cartoon Research had some great ones from the Fleischer's Animated News for their internal newsletters.
Yeah.
I count that because that's not really a fanzine; it's the official. work scene, whatever.
Yeah.
1950s, you hit the Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse Club magazine, which only ran for like 13
What?
issues, but really showing off behind the scenes on animation stuff. But before that turned into the Mickey Mouse Club magazine. And then once you finally get to the 60s, then you have ASIFA launching their newsletter and stuff. And then actual fan people, Funny World in 1966, I believe, is the first one. I haven't come across one earlier than Funny World.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless
And
an
his are
odd,
so expensive.
unless it's an odd issue of Graphic Story World or something, you know, but not.
But you just say Funny Worlds are so expensive. Did you just say
They
that?
are. They are so
Can I give
expensive
you
to
can I
track
give you a
down.
word of advice?
Sure.
Buy them at comic book stores. Go to comic book stores, look in their fanzine section.
Yeah.
I got 8 issues of Funny World one time for $1 a piece.
Oh man, yeah, I need to.
Also, the later issues are pretty cheap still, considering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Oh.
for example, I got it gives into like that's one of those things where I love Michael Barrier. I like him a lot. I love this Hollywood cartoons book. I love his, but you get in some gray areas there from
Well, it's also the first and so early. Like it's so hard for me to
various
it's so hard for
family
me to
feuds
disassociate
and
the internet from being able to research. Like a lot of
Yeah.
anything prior to the 90s, it's amazing anything got done. I know. It's also been a little bit difficult because a lot of these magazines didn't run for very long, and you want to. I've been archiving my own collection, but it's hard because I'd love to see these reprinted. I would love to see compilation books reprinting it for the next generation, because there's some really fascinating primary source interviews with awesome, like, you care about me, little do they know 40 years later, like, yeah, we really do, like,
especially now that you've been dead for 40 years. Yes.
and it's I don't know, it's great. Go ahead.
one of the things that I asked Jerry Beck about, and he really wants to do, he'd like to do one day, is to make a best of cartoon research, put into a book, and let the authors behind them elaborate on them. So you can have like author things like Jim Corcus reprinting his articles on Bill Scott talking about the Gerald McBoing Boing show, and Jim Corcus can elaborate on it more, and that would become a chapter in a book. That's something that Jerry has wanted to do. And I have a question for you. So what do you get about things that inspired animation? For example, this is where I think you get into the gray area about newspaper strips.
So
it's really hard to argue that an author like Harriman or Winsor McKay or George McManus didn't inspire a lot of animators.
Well, it's just like not counting Muybridge.
Yeah.
Like, where does Muybridge fit in animation? You can't talk about animation without the pioneer for cameras. Well, really, but then you're now into film studies. So it's one of those weird, like, I keep coming back to a periphery bibliography, but it feels like I've got an MGM, the history of MGM right over here. And there's I have that book. There's too. Like no information about animation in here. Right. But
I got that book for free.
But knowing about MGM the library is super important for understanding why they went into the business to begin with, and the context of early American cinema.
Well, that reminds me is like old TV specials. Are you branching out and doing that? Okay, because there's like one now they barely touch on it on that, but I just rewatched it. Is MGM When the Lion Roars with Patrick Stewart? They have one brief bit with Hanna and Barbera. Hanna says nothing. Barbera says a few lines, and it's mainly showing Jerry the Mouse and Gene Kelly, and that's about it.
I know what you're talking about.
And I don't even think they show they have Esther Williams in it, and they don't show the Tom and Jerry clip from that. It's like, wow.
Warner Brothers documentaries do the same problem, which I wonder if their 100th documentary coming out is going to justify that. I bet it will, because now they're not going to spend as much time talking about the jazz singer.
Or they will, but they won't show the controversial part of it, I suppose. But anyway,
To answer your question though, Kamden, it is a challenge because especially early animation had such a strong crossover with newspaper comics. We've talked at length about how it's hard to pull one string. And then even when you start getting into the 70s and 80s, like I found out recently, if it hadn't been for Nintendo and Disney working together, or was it Disney? Yeah, Disney and Popeye were the two video games that they had agreements with. And if it weren't for those, we wouldn't have ended up with Mario working out. So it's like one of those weird, if little pieces of history over here that doesn't necessarily make animation sense triggers off a whole other medium business adventure. It's like talking, how people like to complain that why are you bringing politics into the conversation? Nothing happens in a vacuum, right? Like the animation doesn't happen in a vacuum. The technological evolvements that occur with animation far go beyond that boundary, and it's give and take too. And that's what's fascinating. That's really what studying animation is, just my tricky way to study life. Like just to study everything.
You get into the rough spots too when you get into Carl Barks, Harvey Comics. You can't argue. It's hard to argue that Jack Kirby or Keaton or Chaplin didn't inspire animation in some way.
I mean, when you start looking at especially with the cartoon license shows like X-Men, whether that's the 80s one or the 90s one or the 2000, and all the love from Mobius when he, and all his comic book inspiration, you need to have that. I guess I'm in design class right now, so I have a lot of references to early design. But if you don't know the vernacular, if you don't know what comes from where or how to describe it, and you don't recognize who Mobius is, then you don't see the influence. It just kind of goes past you. So it's kind of, I guess, one big master course.
Right. It's like I've always noticed that the bigger George Harriman was, the more mice would appear in cartoons. Like Paul Terry was doing mice cartoons since the beginning, but the more Harriman did stuff, the more mice, the more cats. And I think the whole cat and mouse thing, there's tons of cat and mouse stuff in cartoons. There's the Mutt and Jeff Topper strip. There's all sorts of stuff. But I think the whole cat and mice thing is really Harriman's doing. Because if it hadn't been for Harriman, a lot of shit wouldn't have been made. And then McKay, it's like if his strips weren't successful, he wouldn't have gone into animation.
So should we change Disney's quote? It all started with a cat. Because since Mickey's based on Felix.
That's awesome.
Have you gotten? Yeah, that's a good question. So, what are the top books on your list? Because I'll tell you mine. Because I told you mine.
Please.
I have a friend. One part of the reason I have such a vast variety of books is because of my friends at the Chuck Jones Gallery. One of my very best friends in the world is Carol Erickson, who works there. She would donate me books left and right, just because. That's how I got John K. Maker's Felix book. That's how I got all sorts of. That's how I got Eric Goldberg's Animation Crash Course book. I got that signed by Eric Goldberg for that exact reason. Which I bought all of my art that I got. My parents or someone bought from her, and she's given me all sorts of books. She helped me get on the phone with June Foray, all this stuff. But one of my top books is the sequel to the Mary Blair book, the book on Ivan Earl. There's a book there's a Hanna-Barbera book I don't have called The World of Hanna-Barbera Cartoons. It's the exhibition catalog. You know what I'm talking about? I don't have it because it's like $85 to buy it.
There's the Hanna-Barbera story, which also seems to fetch quite a bit of money. Which
oh my god, are you talking about Stuart Fisher's book?
Yeah.
Oh god, I'll give you my copy. I'll give you my copy. That is the single worst book on animation ever written. That is a horrible book.
It must have been printed in
I
low
have to say,
quality then, or
if I have
quantity
to, if I've read a single book, probably my two least favorite books in animation aren't even Hollywood Doc prints. It's the book Serious Business,
Hmm.
and it's the Hanna-Barbera story. All it is a bunch of filmographies mixed in with like Wikipedia clipped articles. It looks like. I can rant at you for 5,000. I literally have never read a book until that book that I bought off my shelf that I thought, you know what, I might want to throw this in the garbage.
That's funny.
I mean, if for me, it's most of the Windsor's books. I would love to track down his art.
I want his Dreams of the Rare Find book, the collection of those. Oh my god, but they're like $800.
Yep. And it's all public domain too, so you can either have the photocopied terrible cheap ones or the really nice overly expensive table.
Yeah, but and they're not only in $800, but then you're also getting them shipped from Germany, which drives into another $125.
Well, do you want me to give you my top 10?
Please,
yeah,
please,
great.
Okay,
please.
Go for it.
Now I'm doing this from memory, so if I leave something out, I'll probably go, "Oh yeah, okay."
That's how I feel.
Okay, so obviously I said Of Mice and Magic. That's a no-brainer. I have to think studios and everything. So I have
Can I guess one of them?
Sure.
I just want to guess one of them because I know that
it's not my own. I'm not even going to guess. Anyway,
is it Joe Adamson's Tex Avery book?
Yeah, that would be one of them. But actually, I tend to like the French Tex Avery book a little bit better. So
do you speak French?
I have the English version.
Oh, yeah, I have the English version too, though. Are you talking about the blue one?
I don't remember. Jeez. Okay. So books I have that I like a lot. So I like the Rankin Bass book by Rick Goldschmidt a lot. I like the Andy Mangels Lou Scheimer Filmation book a lot. Notice they're all TV so far, but that's not why. I like the dual ones, the Tom and Jerry and the Tex Avery ones that were done by that French guy, and they're just
nice. I like his MGM book.
They're nice, handsome books. I don't even like Tom and Jerry all that much, to be honest, and it's like, but I love that book. So if you're gonna do a smart book, I like most of Jerry Beck's book, but if I picked one other than Of Mice and Magic, it probably would be that Hanna-Barbera book. That's probably
God, yes.
Because I still quibble with the 100 Looney Tunes ones. So
yeah, I do too.
And I like the 50 greatest cartoons quite a bit too. But I still would rather, if I had to pick one other than Of Mice and Magic, it'd probably be the Hanna-Barbera book. What other studios are there? I have to go mentally in my head. Some books are kind of dry, but I like it. Like I like Walter Lance's book, to be honest. It's a little dry, but I
imagine Adamson had to come to terms, tweeter out the myths of Walter's life.
As far as a good Disney book, geez, that's gonna be hard.
I just picked up Ink and Paint, and I
my god,
loving it.
That's in my top. Oh my god, I cannot wait for Mindy Johnston's next book. I literally told her, I'm like, I am going to buy your next book signed.
Wait, do I have that one? Wait, show the cover. Do you have it there?
Yeah, I got it right here.
Okay. Sometimes I don't know things. Oh, I don't have that one. I want that one. I had an opportunity to get it because I'm in the Disney Movie Club. If you get enough points, and I was just getting right amount of points.
Orrin,
they discontinued
do yourself a favor. Don't join the Disney Movie Club. I will go on a rant. They're evil. They're evil
Except
people.
That's the only place you can get Blu-rays of some of their films cheap. And
if you want them cheap, I will buy them for you to get out of that club.
Why? I've met the whatevers. So all I have to
Yeah.
do is just
I
decline
will out.
everything.
I want out. They're evil.
Well, you gotta buy your
corporation.
4 films. You can't just sit there and bellyache about it. That's what I notice. People go, "Well, I got my 4 films for a penny. How come I can't get out of this?" Well, you gotta buy like 4 more at regular prices. It's
Yeah,
just,
but they charge you 50. They charge you like $35.
buy the ones and get out of it. But you don't have to get out of it at that point because you met your commitment. It's no wonder you're not married. You have to. It's a commitment, dude. Anyway, just teasing. Anyway, but what other books are there? I like the When Magoo Flew. I like that one a lot.
Yes.
Yes.
I still will say Leslie Cabarge's Fleischer story, even though the other Fleischer book that our friend what's his face did, and I shouldn't say what's his face because I've interviewed him on the podcast. Sorry, but my brain's escaping me. But I like both Fleischer books.
How about have you read the G. Michael Dobbs' new book?
I thought you were gonna say the GM ABC's of Hand Tools book. Yes, I have read that. Anyway, but no. What's the Michael Dobbs book? See,
it's a brand new
Oh, then
Fleischer
I
book.
probably don't
Actually,
have
it's
it.
supposed to be in 2 volumes.
Oh, okay. No, don't have that. Now, okay, was there anything I should have said? Oh, I know. I forgot Bill Scott's Jay Ward book, of course.
Bill Scott's.
Yeah. Yeah, his too. His Scott, Keith Scott's. Hey, if I can't remember Ray Pointer, I certainly can't remember. Orrin, are you related to Bill? Or Keith?
Nope. But ironically,
Okay.
Dad's name is Bill.
Okay.
I have.
Wow.
Can I give you mine?
All right.
Please.
All right. They are of Mice and Magic, obviously. Of The Moose That Roared.
Mm-hmm.
I would say The Art of Jay Ward Productions by Gerald Van Sitters.
Okay.
I would say 2 Kaufman books. I would say The Fairest One of All and Pinocchio, No Strings Attached. Ink and Paint is another one. I would say The Hanna-Barbera Treasury is a bingo. I would say just because of when I got it, it was a big deal. Not that it's one of the greatest of all time, but when I got it, it made a huge impact of my interest. Steve Stolier's Warner Brothers cartoons book. It's not the greatest book in the world. I think it could have been a more improved book, but I think that just when I got it, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I also would say, I would say a tie. I would say a 3-way tie. I'm going to do a 3-way tie for number 9 between the Mary Blair book, the layout book, animation layout. You know which one I'm talking about? And The Noble Approach.
That was expensive.
And then I would do the number 10. It would be, I got to choose either The Animation Art of Friz Freeling or Tex Avery, King of Cartoons. It's a tough
What's
one.
the layout book? What's that one? You have that
That's one I imagine you do not have that one, Orrin.
You're talking the archive series, right?
No,
Walt
I'm
Disney?
talking about McLean's book.
Oh,
Animation layout with 100 Dalmatians in the front.
setting the scene.
Then it's setting the scene. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have that one yet. No.
Because it's like $300. I don't know how my
That's
mom
probably why I
found it.
don't have it either.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
right.
Because I was saying.
I don't know how my mom found it, but she found it for cheap.
Okay.
So, if I may,
Sure.
Yeah.
one of the first off, if I'm a big Lupin the Third fan, and
Okay.
this book just came out last year, and I'm gonna forget the author, so I'm gonna look him up. This gentleman has been writing literally every single paper from any Lupin publication for like the last. Reed Nelson, of course. Reed has written or everything for every launch of any Lupin DVD or Blu-ray since I've been around, and he got to write this 50th anniversary book, and I love it. He does a great job going through 50 years of like one series and still making it interesting. He still loves it. I don't know how you can write about one topic for so long. I mean that for everyone. I don't know how we all do it. The first.
Well, that's why I jump around. I mean,
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's not all animation for me. So anyway,
In 2008, when I was first following cartoon research and really jumping into things, Jonathan Clements' Anime a History was like mind blower for me, because it gave me context. Like I said earlier, I'm from the Midwest, and a lot of the steel industry out here was developed by Japan. A lot of the cities in our area have sister cities in Japan.
Where are you in Indiana? Do you mind if I interrupt? Because I was just at
cool.
Indiana University last week.
Yeah, you were mentioning that. I'm up in South Bend, and Mayor Pete's backyard, if you will.
is that that's East Coast or West Coast of Indiana?
So Indiana and Michigan's right here. We're right on the border, right in the middle.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So if it takes me like 40 minutes to get to Chicago via the South Shore train, it's neat. And then yeah, go ahead.
You're fairly close to the Popeye Museum too.
Am I? Isn't that in Wisconsin?
No, it's not Wisconsin. That's the Grim Natwick Museum. Popeye Museum's in Chester, Illinois. I've driven out there.
Yeah,
I'd recommend it, friends.
You're right, because that was where spinach was being made at the time. They sold so much that.
Well, actually that's where Seagar was born. That's why it's there.
Oh, okay. I'm mixing it up with the other one. My bad.
Speaking of which, I do like that Grandin Eddy book that just came out. He talks about the TV cartoons. I know people hate those cartoons, but he did a good job with that. So
yeah,
I love good books on lousy cartoons. That's probably why I have the Filmation thing, because I was never a Filmation fan, and
no one is.
It made me a fan. I go, and then I started buying all the DVDs and everything. So anyway, go on.
The books on Lou's books are fun. His daughter's books. I forget her name. I forget a lot of names unless I have the books in front of me.
just say Ray Pointer, because he's mad.
Yeah, there we
go. His name. He's texting right now. That bastard ain't forgot my name.
The only other like really sentimental book I have is I'm a big Venture Brothers fan, and it's as far as shows that take its characters seriously and its continuity seriously and its pop culture love seriously. Those cats are so deep in pop culture. It took them 2 or 3 years to write one season, and then we'd have to wait another 2 or 3 years for one season. And but
come on,
anyway.
Orrin, you got 7 more left, dude.
Oh, geez. A lot of
well, 4 of them are behind his chair there.
It's true. I did actually the Cartoon Research Winsor McKay books. I had the pleasure to meet Kevin Scott Collier, and he was kind enough to introduce over in Spring Lake, Michigan, which is where Winsor grew up. He was able to share with me a whole bunch of awesome Winsor information, and I got to learn about his uncle.
I wish Kevin would do more books too.
I do too. He's been really busy. For last I saw, he launched his animation studio, and it seems to be finding some success doing that. I don't know. I haven't tuned in too much beyond just seeing how busy he's been.
Okay.
And Jerry's books are also go-to fun. I mean, most recently, I've been really excited over some of the older ones, like Doing Their Bit. This was written in the 1960s, talking about all the World War II books. It's fascinating, because even though you go to the older ones and it's all just kind of like summaries of some of the cartoons, the way they describe them is really fascinating. It's all kind of, it's contextual. It's more interesting when you know about why these things were written and what the subjects were trying to do. And then anything by Paul Wells has been something. He's been really changing my concept of understanding what animation on a more academic and philosophical level. I'm not an artist.
Neither am I.
I love
Mark. You're the only person who's ever dwelled into art, and all 3 of us, and you're not even an artist either anymore.
No.
But I enjoy it as a meditative practice. But to create something, to stay focused on your art that long, to be able to make something. No, that ain't me.
I always tell people that when we were in, I've never been an artist, and by the time I was in 6th grade, I knew I drew like shit. And by the time I was in 4th grade, I knew I did everything else like shit, because I would be like I would be like, we would have to like make a sculpture of baby Jesus or whatever, and I literally would tell my teacher, "You're wasting my time. I'm wasting yours."
Wow. No, I ate that stuff up. I mean, I was always good in art. If we did 3-dimensional things, I was always
No,
for that.
my parents are shitty at art, and I grab
Uh,
it from them.
my parents are great at art, but my dad, he became an engineer, and then he didn't like it. He was going to be an architect, and he didn't like that, and he ended up doing high-tech sales forever and made a lot of money doing that. And I said, "Don't you miss doing the art?" And he goes, "Nah," because my dad's more money focused, so it's like, it didn't rub off to me apparently.
Yeah.
But in my situation, yeah, I used to draw cartoons and comic strips and comic books. I'd show them around to friends. I'd do parodies of things. I got in the school.
Yep.
I got in the school newspaper.
For more info on this, check out episodes one something and one
I don't know
something
the
else
episodes,
where I
when I'm talking
overview
about
Mark's
me.
life
Yeah.
and yeah.
But what stopped it all was, and I probably said it in the episode, was
You did.
I graduated in '84.
Mhm.
Now, what was the state of animation in 1984? Okay.
Bullshit.
And I really wanted to go to Cal Arts, and my dad didn't want to send me. He said, "I can't afford it. Why don't you just go to fill in the blank school?" And it's like, I don't want to go to any school. I want to go to Cal Arts. And so, because I couldn't go to the one school I wanted to go to, I just said, well, okay, then I'll just go to the local junior college, which I did. And they didn't have an animation department, of course. And so, closest thing was film and television. So I did that, and I learned all the stuff about live action film and how to do television and everything else. And, just fell in love with all that stuff more than I already had. So, that's where that all came from. And my contemporary, even though he's a few years older than me, or contemporaries plural, are probably like Mike Cazala and Milton Knight, who actually roughly my same age. They're a few years older, but they actually went into the industry. And with talking with them for the years that I have and knowing them and everything, I'm glad I didn't, because I would have gone nuts. It's like I would have wanted to put out quality stuff, and there's just crap. And by the time things like Simpsons and all the good 90s stuff was coming out, I probably would have been out of the business, because I just would have been so frustrated all those years trying to do it. But
so I graduated high school in 2008, which was just perfect timing for the economy to crash. And
that's great when that was right when I was sitting in the Porter's bookstore asking for the Hanna-Barbera Treasury.
So my chasing of the animation dream was, all right, well, the animation industry is in Atlanta or Dallas. I guess I just have to go to Atlanta or Dallas and I'll find something. And get to Dallas, and it doesn't quite work that way. Get to Atlanta, track down Jason DeMarco, Adult Swim. Hey, I got ideas. And he's like, cool. Who doesn't? And so then, returning home for a couple of years, figuring out, it's a challenge when you're not an artist and you enjoy this field, because there's a lot of artistry to it. There's a lot of, even if you aren't a direct drawing person, you can still do 3 dimensions. There's ways to go about it. If you like puppetry, I mean, stop motion. I mean, how physical of an artist do you want to be in animation? And if you have no interest in any of it, it's okay. What are you bringing to the table? For me, it's every animated film has, it's that story, it's that lesson, it's that spark of why in the first place did they want to make it. And I tracking and learning everything down has been, it has only made me more well-rounded, learning about so many success and also terrible stories. There's a lot of sadness in this history. There's a lot of not great stories of people putting in their fortunes and trying to find and make it big and find their own successes. Some do, most don't. It's I don't know, it's like, it's life.
Yeah. Well, for me, I didn't have the self-esteem to handle it. Like, if I had to do it now, or if I felt like the way I do now back when I was in my early 20s, I would have braved it and done it. But it's like, I didn't want to get hurt, and I said, well, it's a safer bet sticking with this and going on this path. It wasn't the
And
most enlightening thing, but arguably I've done well for myself because I've always kept my foot creatively, and I did my own fanzine for a number of years, and now I'm doing books and a podcast, so it's like
you mentioned also, if doing it now, how much different it would be. And that's been, going back to college 15 years later has been like, wow, things really have changed. I am capable, I think, and it is amazing. You do
now I
change
don't
quite a
want to
bit.
do it because I'm so much older, but I mean, if
right.
I had my confidence that I have now when I was in
Sure.
my 20s, I would have done it because I said I have nothing to lose. But I used to
Right.
say, oh, I'm gonna fail, and all that stuff. So it's like, oh well, that's what life's about. You learn.
I have
Absolutely.
2 other books, by the way. I wish I said.
Of course you do. Oh, go ahead.
Winsor McKay's Life and Art. And that great large book that doesn't even fit on my shelf, the Mickey Mouse book by Kaufman and Gerstein.
Yeah, I don't think that's off shelf. Yeah, it's off camera.
The Art of Walt Disney is a good book.
Oh, The Art of Walt Disney is a great book, but
are
you looking are you really gonna pull that whole thing down?
Watch all the books fall down.
Yeah, that book is huge.
I've been going through this since
I've seen it
picked
before,
this
though.
one up a couple weeks ago, and
my sister bought it for me for a high school graduation gift.
Isn't there a small version, like
yeah, but here's the deal, Mark. You gotta buy the big one.
Oh, of course.
You gotta buy the big one. I know the small one costs like $20, but the big one, but they edited a lot out of it.
Of course, they do that all the time. That's a Taschen book, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because Taschen does that all the time. They did that with Marvel Comics. They did this big deluxe Marvel Comics, which my name's in, but I don't own it. And then they did this little highlight book, which I don't own either because I wanted the big book, but it's out of print. It's like $400 now. It's like, of course, I didn't get a free copy for sending them scans and everything. Anyway.
The Taschen books are gorgeous. All of them are. Anything that the Winsor McKay.
I just got the little Nemo one for Christmas. A little secret that's completely known to everyone in the industry right now already. They're making a Donald version of that book.
Oh, cool. I did not know that.
But my sister got me that book when it was really prime, like $250 prime when it first came out for my high school graduation gift. It's a pretty good gift, I know. And I'm like, well, maybe y'all can buy me Donald for my college graduation gift 4 years later. Senior. It isn't going to come out when I graduate grad school either.
Orrin.
Yes.
More questions. How do you have your books organized? Is it just alphabetical by author, or is it how do you have it?
I try to have it replicated like my bibliography, so subsectioned into CGI over here, Disney over here.
People have your books organized?
Right now they are more pretty than normal. Usually they're pulled out. I'm usually in a bunch of them reading, referencing, and especially as I'm preparing for my paper for this year's Society of Animation Studies conference, I'm trying to come up with I submitted, don't tell anyone, no, I submitted I'm going to start analyzing some of the barriers keeping people from entering our field, whether that's artistically or studying it, and trying to is it exclusively money? Is it access to information? Is it something else? What's preventing us from continuing to move forward and grow more? As animation ain't for kids, and so it is, and it's not at the same time. Obviously, it depends on what we're making, but it as it grows up and starts needing to do more adult things, like tackle all sorts of subjects and do all sorts of things and build new markets and build new economies, and we're in an exciting time, especially as there's been a lot of talk of artificial intelligence, yada yada yada, and at the end of the day, animation is still an art, and art we don't like when computers take that away from us. So I don't think animators have much to be worried about.
Let me just tell you something. You should really join the Comic Studies of America. the International Comic Studies. I was just talking to a member the other day at Indiana State. I happened to randomly happen to be one of my professors, happened to be a member. One of the professors I was meeting completely by chance. We were talking about something similar. We were talking about I think that what I've heard from comics, the people in the comic studies, as well as the National Cartoonist Society, it's the same talk.
Mhm.
It's all a cartooning fear at this point.
It is interesting times because I mean that was one thing I also considered in high school, and you don't consider it at all now, is having a newspaper strip. It's like, it's
Yeah.
insane. Nowadays, if you did your own comic, you do your web comic and then maybe compile it into a book. But
Right.
that's very
Or-
different than sending things to King Features, United Features, Field Communications, whatever all the different ones were at the time. Now there's like no syndicates. There might be one King. It's like,
Yeah. I think United is still around.
I thought that got absorbed by King also, but maybe I'm wrong on that. So anyway.
No,
Uh,
I think there's like two. There's the guys who run Go
Yeah.
Comics, and then there's the
I guess
guys who run
they have to
Comics
have two
Kingdom.
so there wouldn't be a monopoly, or anyway.
Yeah. Somehow strips like Broomhilda and Gasland Alley are still existence.
Well, I mean, if it's been around, it's going to stay. But I mean, if you were just starting out, if you were a hotshot artist and you're really funny, and showed your friends all these comics that you did, hey, you're great. I mean, you'd be better off actually probably knocking on Scholastic store and being like Dave Pilkey and stuff, and put your comic strips in the graphic novels nowadays to
Right.
get seen, which is odd but true. It's like,
I mean, now it's a pathway for like that YouTuber Odd One Out. He's gone from web comic-ish to YouTuber to animation on Netflix, full animated platform. So the old ways of distribution have it's changed.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what I
that's-
got out of doing a fanzine. When I stopped it in 2011, which I felt I kept it going 10 years longer than I should have. There's friends of mine that were like, "Oh, don't stop," and it's like, I have to. It costs me money to do it. Before, at least I was making a little bit of money, or at least breaking even. But I was just paying, and it got to the point where I was publishing 4 times a year, and I cut back to 2 times a year. And I said, "All right, do I want to go broke this month or next month?" That's where it got to the point. And I just said, I'm stopping. I got to stop,
It's unfortunate when the cost of when the material object costs more than the production itself.
That's what we're delving into. Some manufacturer of some product does something that we don't quite understand, to the fact that none of this is a marketable product. I think Mark, you know exactly who I'm referring to.
Yeah. Well, even if I don't know exactly what you're referring to, I know other examples because about 3 or 4 different people popped in my head. So anyway. All right. One other question. I had 2.
Yes.
Second one. So you mentioned puppets. So do things like the Muppets or anything like that get in there? Is that way going beyond the line of animation at that point? And I'm not talking about Muppet Babies animated cartoons. I'm talking about real Muppets themselves.
Yeah. I try not to incorporate puppetry because I can see why the definition of animation applies to puppetry.
Yeah.
And I understand why it's considered like a sister field, but I try not to unless the book is explicitly talking about animation in its truest sense.
Yeah.
Like the truest.
No, I think if there was a book on like Clampett's puppetry, that'd be like a different situation.
Yeah, exactly. Because Clampett, if I recall correctly, Clampett's stop motion or puppetry was also mixed in with animation too. Like, wasn't it intersections? No.
No.
But he had time for Beanie, and then it became Beanie and Cecil. So I mean,
and I'm one of the rare people who don't even care for the Muppets. That's the other thing that That's the other thing that I was going to say, besides A Christmas Story, which I can handle A Christmas Story. It's the Muppets that I don't like that everyone else does.
Well, I'll agree with you post Henson, but anyway, that's
all right. I'll agree with that assessment. Yeah,
that's my little beef. But I'm that way on a lot of things. It's hard for me post.
I'm that way.
Post
Disney,
Mel
post
Blanc
Walt.
on Looney Tunes. I'll even watch Looney Christmas Tales from '79 because it's still Mel Blanc.
I'm that way. I'm that way. But Disney post Walt, I'm done.
Post-Walt. Oh wow. Well, I'll go to pre-Eisner, but
Yeah,
that's why I wrote
accept.
the book. Yeah. Anyway, no,
I
the
also
reason
it's
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry.
I was
My bad. Go for it.
okay. The reason I was asking about puppets is basically that I'm working on a book Kamden knows about. You may know about it. It's TV cartoons that time forgot, which basically is
Which I begged him to write.
general kind of umbrella thing. I'm kind of on a hiatus. I haven't been writing on it since November. Sorry, Kamden, but that's because I'm trying to finish my Mad book and my Turtles book and all the other things I'm trying to finish so I can work on this. But anyway, the interesting thing, and I've been using Kevin's books as sources and different things like that because he has a lot of the early TV stuff already done, like Teletales and stuff like that, is the prevalence of articles that think they're talking about animation, but they're really talking about puppets. And
Mhm.
and so there's far fewer true animated shows from, I start kind of roughly in 49 when Crusader Rabbit was on originally, and that and Teletales is usually considered the first TV thing, unless somebody wants to argue about Felix the Cat statue in 1923 or something, but being
Winky
televised,
Dink and You.
but well, even Winky Dink and You is later.
Yeah.
But there's a long gap. It's like those shows came out then, and then there's a long gap until I mean, you get like Mighty Mouse Playhouse, or you get theatricals on TV and stuff like that. But
Well,
an
out of
actual
curiosity, doesn't
TV made show, there was almost 10 years, and then suddenly in 57 you got Rough and Ready, you got more Crusader Rabbit, you got this, that, and the other, blah 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 blah. Anyway, I don't know what my point is, but the puppet
But-
thing, that's fine. Yeah.
So, well, isn't that kind of like Thunderbirds described itself as super marionation, if I
Yeah.
recall correctly?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
can kind of see being an almost marketing problem, like to the
Right.
unsuspecting audience or people back then. I mean, even I don't know if you watched Kablam back on Nickelodeon, but there was Action League Now, which that wasn't even animation, but it was packaged in an animated variety show. But that was just action figures twitching back and forth and throwing them across the room. I think they called it Chuckanation or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Or even
I don't know. It's like that weird era during the 60s when everybody described their own. It's not animation, it's
yeah.
Now,
you know.
I have a question for you too.
Yeah.
So 2 questions. First of all, I would definitely consider him an animator. I know that some people have questioned whether or not Ray Harryhausen, when you talk about some of his art, whether or not it's animation or it's special effects. It's animation.
Ray's in there. Yeah, everything about Ray is in the bibliography because I
Yeah,
completely
it's
agree with
that's
you. He's
the argument
stop
against
motion to a T.
right. It's definitely stop motion. It's definitely
Mhm.
animation.
Yeah.
Now the other question was, what is a book that you would want an animation what is something that you would like to that either is not made or is not in production? A book about animation, subject animation you would like to see. Mine would be I would love to see something about the Bray Studios as a book. I would love for Tommy Stathis to write a Bray Studios book,
Oh, that'd be great.
or David Gerstein.
Yeah, either one of them would be really good.
Or I would love to see something written about the distribution side of animation.
That's a great question. Because because my to-do list is to read list is already full of books I want to read. So, let me think about that. Mark, do you have an answer for that?
The one that pops in my head is I wish there was a better Terry Toons book. I like the Terry Toons book. I don't love the Terry Toons book. That one, yeah.
Yeah, here's my problem with this book. What is with the 3 columns?
Well, I hate that. But beyond that, once you get past that, it's not an easy read, and
Yeah.
it's like, I it's almost like I should just take his book and rewrite it how I have my total television, and make the book I want, but I'm not going to do that because, I would love somebody like, I mentioned him already, Milton Knight or Mike Cazala,
Yeah.
to do a Terry Toons book, and they're not into writing books, I know, but I can dream, can I? But it's like,
Right.
because they have so much knowledge. It's just like Mark Evanier. I wish for years he would do a Bell Gold Key book, because he knows it all. He's talked to the people. He was there, and he just regurgitates it all, and it's like, put this in a book, dude. And he's like,
I mean, even if
Because
he doesn't want to write
and
down,
his
just
excuse
record
is
the
bad
man and
because he's
write
written
it.
several books.
What was that?
And his excuse is bad because he's written several books.
And even Jerry Beck, I won't give away ones, don't give away anyone's either, I don't want to edit anything, but he's talked about books that he wants to do, but he hasn't done them yet. Now that doesn't mean he's not going to do them, but it's kind of, come on, Jerry, do these books, so
Yeah.
and don't mention them, but anyway, I
The
know
other
a couple of them that I would
subject
love
I'd like to see,
yeah.
for Disney books, I have a couple of things.
Hmm.
I'd love to see an Art of Cinderella book. I'd love to see an Art of Dumbo book. And I would love to see, because you've got Mary Blair, you've got Tyra Swan, you've got Murray Snowball, you've got Ivan Durrell, you've got all of those guys. I'd like to see a book about Walt Paragoy's art. I think that he's one of those layout artists that really defined a certain movie, 101 Dalmatians. I think that would make a good book.
There are two people I want to read their autobiography. I want to read Mike Lazo's autobiography about working his way up through Turner and creating Adult Swim and all of those wonderful creative executive decisions, because three things about him. One, he never went into the public limelight. Rarely when he did, they were very concise and very controlled. Two, whenever you hear any artist talk about their show on Adult Swim, they thank him for making their show better. It is consistent. You hear it all the time. I would love to, and now that he's retired, come on, Mike, go write.
Yeah, Mike, if you're listening to that.
Andrea Romano, same thing. I mean,
I love Andrea. She is brilliant.
She mentioned she's going to write a book now that she's retired.
Andrea is very nice.
Why would you write a book when you're in paradise? But she should.
May I just say something about Andrea Romano?
Please.
She is extremely nice. I have interviewed her several times. She is always open to conversation. I wrote an essay by Hanna-Barbera.
Seth Green, of all people, would have ended up becoming one of her many proteges,
right.
and a successful protege at that. I mean, his directing style, I hope eventually, once Robot Chicken ends, I hope he does more projects, because from the sounds of other actors and writing, it sounds like he's really picked up a lot of Andrea's tactics for getting the best performances out of actors. And him being an actor, it's not too much of a surprise to find that out. So I don't know, both those cats would be super phenomenal. And then I think
that if the series ever ends, I think that there should be a definitive official book on The Simpsons. The problem is, I think that should be I do think, though, that it should be a multi-volume book.
Craig McCracken also needs a book about him. Gendy's had quite a few books about him, and I'm not finding his off the top of not seeing it immediately, but now that he's had one out, I want to read about Craig, and I want to read about, the directors that I was raised on.
Now, what book did y'all read and y'all really thought it was going to be good, and then you read it and you were kind of disappointed by it?
Oh boy.
I'll give you mine. It's Jeff Lindbergh's The Great Cartoon Directors.
So this is almost not fair, because I just needed to do more research. But when I came across the Animation Magazine's 20-year collection, I was like, oh, yeah, a whole book on the whole magazine. I am in. And it ended up just being an awesome gallery of all of their posters.
Oh,
I'm like, oh, no.
I've seen that before. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I was disappointed and didn't buy it.
I've seen Time Magazine books like that, too. I was shelving the other day at my work, and I was looking.
Beautiful book.
Sometimes I'm not paying attention at work, and I'm shelving. And if you're ever a librarian, you're going to pick up a book and look at it. So I was looking, and I was like, oh, Complete Time. Complete History is this Complete History of Time Magazine. It's a book on the covers.
Yeah.
You're an
Well,
hourly
I
wage,
actually
right? No.
like books like that, but the problem with the animation book there is they made the covers full size. I mean, at
Mm.
least in the Time magazine ones, it's like a little, I have a Sports Illustrated one, I have an Ebony magazine one, Life magazine one, and they have the covers really small.
Life
And
one
it's
is
like,
another
it's
one I've
fun.
seen.
I have a Saturday Evening Post. I love books like that.
Mm.
It's like, so, but yeah, the animation one, it's like a cheat. It's like, it's a big thick book and it's all taken up with full page pictures, so, and it's like nothing, no articles, no best of what's going on here, I don't know.
Yeah. Now, Mark, it's your turn. What book did you pick up and you were like, you're really disappointed by? Jeff Lindbergh's I hated because it's all wrong. A lot of
Yeah,
it's wrong.
well, as I've said before, Lindbergh is not a good author when it comes to animation books. He's not too bad on Three Stooges stuff. So
Yes.
it's like,
I actually did eventually get that book.
okay, there we go. So, I don't know the title of it. I think you'll probably know it. Is Woody Woodpecker on the cover. It's by Perry, I think. It's an animation book.
Oh,
And it's like, at the time, because it came out either right before or right after of Mice and Magic, and it was, back in those days, animation books were a little few and far in between. You may not know this because you weren't around then, but it's like, and so you just grabbed anything. But it's like, it's just painful, and it's like, because there had been, good books prior to Mice and Magic. We've mentioned some, the Fleischer book by Kabarja,
Tex Avery,
the Tex Avery book, yeah, and I'm trying to think of some others that came out before of
Art of Walt Disney, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and and then of course after of Mice and Magic, it's like night and day. But I'm just talking about ones that came out in the 70s or before. There were very few and far between. Mostly talking about theatrical stuff. I mean, TV stuff was considered dreck, and if they did talk about TV, it might be, just early Hanna-Barbera at best. But even then, books didn't even talk about that stuff. It's like, so
Animation just came from the ether.
yeah, well, I mean,
I guess the biggest thing that launched everything though was that issue of Film Comment, which I have a story about that issue. I have a story about that.
What's on the cover? Is that the one with Daffy Duck, or is it one?
No, with the Bugs Bunny on the cover.
Oh, the Bugs Bunny one. Okay.
The one that Greg Ford curated.
Oh, okay. All right.
I have a story about that. I was showing Craig Cawson, the grandson of Chuck Jones. Mark, we've had him on I've had him on your show.
Yeah.
The book, and I had never met Jerry Beck before. Jerry walks behind me. He looks at me and says, "I bought that the day it came out. That's how old I am." He walks away.
I believe it. Jerry was there when Winsor McKay was animating the Lusitania, right? I knew you'd like that one. Anyway, no, Jerry's been around, but it's like, it's handy to have somebody like Jerry Beck. But when I was young, and you saw, because I gave you that issue of Mind Rot Kamden, it's like all my idols were in there. It was Jim Korkis and Jerry Beck and Leonard Maltin. I didn't know who these people were. Leonard Maltin wasn't on TV. He wasn't on Disney DVDs. He wasn't around. He was some New York guy. I think his film thing. Yeah. And it's
Steve
like
Stanchfield called Mind Rot, the cartoon research said that Mind Rot was, to me, I think it was Steve, or it could have been somebody else, but I think I'm going to say it's Steve Stanchfield, but I'm sure Steve would say this too. Mind Rot was to me what cartoon research is to today.
Yeah.
Today, people like, I saw people when I was first entering this reading cartoon research, people like Devin Baxter and Jerry, and of course I knew who these people were because their photos would be right on the thing. The internet existed.
But when you read those old Mind Rots, it's like, hey, I compiled a list of all the Scrappy cartoons. Nowadays, you just go on the internet, Wikipedia, you got
it.
But back
Wikipedia.
then,
Why do you want Wikipedia when you can use Harry McCracken's Scrappyland? Hence why we should have a web bibliography, Orrin.
There we go. But you know what I mean. It's like many places, not just one.
I say this
back then
love,
there wasn't one, because you'd compile Jerry Beck. Let's say he did it. Hey, I got all the cartoons together, and I got 25 Scrappy cartoons. And then next month Jim Korkis will say, well, you forgot these 3. Oops. And it's like, because nobody had access to all this stuff, and the studios are being all close to the vest about this stuff. They didn't care about cartoons that were made back then 40 years earlier. It's kind of funny nowadays. We dwell on things 40 years earlier, like the current stuff, Star Wars, and stuff like that. And it's just weird, the difference between then and now is how we perceive things.
Which is anyway. Interesting, because like Mark, I've always found it fascinating when you were growing up. The interesting thing about Gen Zers, I think, is that I think that they hate older stuff more than ever, because I remember what Nick Santa Maria, you and I were saying. And Nick said that young people seem to like the Three Stooges. I think that was true for millennials. I unfortunately don't think that's true for Gen Zers.
And Gen Z is after millennial? I'm getting confused. Okay, I'm Gen X. So I'm out of the alphabet. What's after Z?
So
where's my Susan Beyond Zebra book? Come on. Anyway.
I think that what's interesting is that when you were growing up, people would still watch Laurel and Hardy, and people wouldn't say like, oh boy, something black and white. People would say that about silent films, but
yeah, I mean, the year I was born, which we'll say no, 1966. Fall of 1966 was when TV turned into color. I mean, literally every show went into color. There were color shows prior to that, but I mean, that was the big year. If you go through your history on TV, it's like fall of 66 is like now in color, and it's like, if it wasn't in color, it was something like, excuse me, it was the fall of 65. What am I talking about? I'm off a year, but fall of 65, but still. Okay. If it wasn't in color 65 and 66 is because it was like Dick Van Dyke Show or something that they knew they're going off the air. Let's keep them all in black and white. We're not going to switch. But anybody else that was going to be on for a few more years, they switched to color. It was Bewitched and Andy Griffith, and TV cartoons were all in color. But they had the foresight to be made in color in most cases already. Right. So suddenly, it's like when I've heard this many times. It's like, wow, I finally saw the Flintstones in color.
Yeah, it's interesting. Scott Shaw, when I did my Hanna-Barbera essay, I did the long essay on Hanna-Barbera, which I told you about, Mark, on this show.
No.
Scott Shaw told me that this is why, and Tom Cito said the same day to me, this is why they were smart. They knew color was coming. They could see it in the very eyes. And they were like, we're not going to be, they said we've seen this happen before when color entered the movie screens. They're going to see it again with television. So they immediately knew this is going to make it work. Yeah. Think about what would happen financially if they had made Huckleberry Hound in black and white.
Well, it wouldn't be remembered today, probably.
Exactly.
Or they would have colorized it later, but anyway.
I'm doing
the question I have, and you guys might be bigger experts in this. Now, granted, it's talking about live action, but if Disney was such a forerunner in color, why did he do things like the Shaggy Dog and the Absent-Minded Professor and the original Mickey Mouse Club and Zorro in black and white? Was it just cost, or do you know? I don't even know. And I asked people this, if it was just, cutting corners there.
Zorro kind of works in black and white.
Yeah, but it could have been in color.
But artistically, I'm making it sound like Citizen Kane here, because I'm actually writing an essay right now for a class on colorization of movies.
Yeah.
And the controversy involved. And so, like, when they tried to colorize Citizen Kane and stuff like that.
Even in the 60s, they weren't thinking, let's do this in black and white to be artistic. I mean, I think the very first movie, honestly, and I might be off because there might be one before this, but I think the very first movie that was actually done purposefully in black and white for an artistic statement might have been Young Frankenstein in 1974. Prior to that,
French, Jean-Luc Godard and the French New Wave in France
they did movies. But did they do it because they were broke, or I mean,
no,
like
they did. He did
the
this
last
intentionally
picture show in
art-wise,
1971's in black and white, and retrospectively they go, I'm glad I shot it in black and white because I was, that's what I meant to do, and or it's like, sure you did, you just didn't have any money. It's like, Night of the Living Dead looks better in black and white than would in color, but it's like
Yeah.
that was not necessarily an artistic choice. Had they had the money, they probably would have shot it in color.
Right.
So,
But like there are certain films that could not have been shot in color. Citizen Kane is one. There's just no way.
yeah, but I
that
mean,
film
that was back
meant...
when everything was in black and white. I mean, even though they already had Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind and blah blah blah, but it's like
Right.
they weren't necessarily making those choices. Maybe Orson Welles kind of was, but
Yeah.
Orson Welles did a lot of his movies in black and white, so I don't know.
Orson Welles is a rare case.
Yeah, except for maybe F for Fake, that's like his one color film or something.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was because World War II had drained Disney at that point. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, we're talking late 50s. But
yeah, but we're talking about they already got the funding for Disneyland.
Sure.
Yeah. Unless ABC had something to do with it, because admittedly, it's like Zorro and Mickey Mouse Club was done for ABC. They were funding Disneyland originally. I might be answering my own question, but and Absent-Minded Professor and Shaggy Dog were supposed to be television episodes on the anthology show. They weren't supposed to be theatrical, but I think Disney thought, hey, these might work in the theater. We might make a little money off of it. Let's put them out in the movie theater. But and then Son of Flubber was later, but I think he just did that one in black and white because it was a sequel, and it's like, might as well make it a sequel in black and white because the original one was, but I don't know.
Am I the only one who doesn't like most of Disney's live action features? There's one exception that I really love. One of my favorite Disney films of all time. 20,000 Leagues. I
think most people don't like them, to be honest. I'm one of the few who do like them, so if you say I don't like Disney's live action features except for 20,000 Leagues, you're probably the majority opinion, because that was the only one Disney put a lot of money for. It was widescreen. It actually had big stars, and he put a lot of effort and money into it and everything. Yeah. Unlike a lot of other live action ones, including even, I think, Mary Poppins kind of skimped in spots.
Well, where Mary Poppins doesn't count.
I'm going to count it for the standpoint is that Mary Poppins is somewhat, and I'm not talking about the scenes with cartoons, is somewhat cartoonish in comparison to 20,000 Leagues, which is 20,000 Leagues looks like a film that 20th Century Fox or one of the other studios could have done.
That was one of the first major films, though, storyboarded in live action.
Mary Poppins looks exactly like a Disney film.
Yeah.
The only other studio that could have done it is after the fact, when they're trying to imitate Mary Poppins, like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang or something. But, a film made at Disney, 20,000 Leagues does not look like a Disney film. It really looks like a film done by 20th Century Fox. And, it looks like, what's that other film that Fox did with Journey to the Center of the World or something like that? It's also Jules Verne, and it also has James Mason and Pat.
Oh wait, I lied. I like Treasure Island too.
Yeah, well, that's early too, and that was with British money, so it's like that's a whole nother thing too.
All those terrible Disney Channel live action films like Luck of the Irish and stuff like that. That was my jam.
Yeah. But like Swiss Family Robinsons, like.
Well, the further you go, I'll admit, even though I love them, that's why I wrote this book. But the further you go, the more corny they get. The gimmicks get more obvious. They get more stupid. But I love those
Shaggy Dog.
Yeah. I love the gimmick films. I mean, I lived for those. It's like, what's going to come next? Oh, a duck that lays gold eggs. Let's go. Yeah. Oh, what's the next one? Oh, a kid.
I like
the kid
the titles
turns invisible
of that
this time. Okay, let's go. All right, what happens this time? Oh, he drinks a thing and gets really strong. Okay, let's go. Oh, a cat from outer space. Okay, let's go. I did that throughout the whole 70s. That's what I grew up. A car that can drive itself, and make,
Herbie.
Yeah, exactly. I ate that stuff
Herbie.
up.
When I think about Herbie, I think about Scott Shaw's Oddball Comics Herbie.
And then I get mad because, Disneyland later on, they start putting, and of course they own it now, but they put in Star Tours and they put in Indiana Jones rides. It's like, where's the Love Bug ride? I want to drive around in my own Herbie car. Get that Autopia out of there and put my Herbie car in. They never did that,
But it's interesting. I also love and I have this weird, and I was talking to JB Kaufman about this. I have this weird relationship with the Mickey Mouse Club. In that I love Disney's TV stuff. I love the Tomorrowland stuff. I like Davy Crockett. I love Zorro.
Yeah.
But the Mickey Mouse Club, it's not that I don't like it. It's just that the idea of a 17-year-old girl running around in a mouse ear costume.
Well, they weren't when they started. It
No.
was on for 4 years.
But
developed.
it's so weird.
This is season 1, 2, 3, 4. You know what season you're at, okay?
And I'm like, but even like when she started, she was already like 13 years old.
Yeah. Well, what's your point? I hated the black and white Mickey Mouse Club, and then they doubled down on it and made a current at the time in the 70s color version.
That's what makes
like,
the first Mickey Mouse Club tolerable.
What?
That's what makes the first Mickey Mouse Club tolerable. The other thing I do think that's fine, and that I think like the animation of Mickey is fine and all that stuff, but like the one thing I do think is fine about them is I know that without the Mickey Mouse Club, financially Disney would not have been as successful on ABC, which we wouldn't have gotten Disneyland, and there's a lot of.
Well, also here's the thing that made me respect Mickey Mouse Club. Okay, so here's why I hated it first. In 1975, they made a big deal. They're going to bring it back. And my mom goes, I love that show, because she's the one who grew up with it. And so they bring it on, and I knew it was going to be in black and white, but I was hoping for cartoons. And there were very rarely mouse cartoon time. There's a lot of Spin and Marty time, and lots of Hardy Boy time, and lots of Leonard Maltin, Walt Disney Treasures sets later on that I didn't buy time, and it's because
I bought them bootleg.
That's the stuff I didn't care for. And it's like, but people that grew up like my mom, they ate it up. And I know why, because when you turned on your TV, you might have Today's Show in the morning, but then after it went off the air at 9 a.m., it was snow until 3 p.m. or 5 p.m. or whenever Mickey Mouse Club came on. And so, you're waiting all day to, see you little whippersnappers, you're spoiled. You get to watch 24 hours, 7 days a week shows, or you can even put them on home video. You don't even have to watch what's being broadcast anymore. You just watched what you got, and if you go back further, my dad, who's still with us, there wasn't even any TV. So there, it's like, I always tell people that they're like shocked. It's like, what? No TV? When I grew up, they didn't have Nintendo. It's like, well, my dad always says, when I grew up, there was no TV, anyway.
When I grew up, there was no Amazon Alexas in every room.
God. When I grew up, the TVs weren't flat.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know where we're going with all this. We've gotten bored with your silly list, Orrin. So keep up the good work. I don't know. I guess the final question, we should probably wrap this up because we're getting about 2 hours. But obviously, you're going to add to this all the time. But I mean, is there a plan for it? I mean, you're doing a book, and then what comes from that? A documentary or a feature film, or
the Animation History Bibliography, the movie. I love it.
There we go.
So it's a dramatic retelling.
Which I was surprised how many fictional books I've ended up putting into it, which actually do have surprising amounts of animation.
Like, have you put those Mary Blair picture books in there?
The children's ones.
I was I was looking through my library, and I'm like, Mary Blair. I'm like, oh, and I was looking at those Peter Pan books. Those books, if I had the money, I would buy those books. Those look gorgeous.
My mom yelled at me. She called me one day. She's like, why didn't you put Saving Mr. Banks in there? And I'm like, because it's fictional drama. And she's like, but it's based on a real true story. And I'm like,
but
yes, Mom.
Well, you have the Dark Prince in
it. Well, I mean, they're basically the same. I mean, one's no more accurate than the other.
I did, finding out about the Rat Factory, and it's ironic, or not ironic, it's kind of interesting history of being a fictional animation production book, and then Jim Carrey's first TV appearance. Like, What a weird.
You mean the Duck Factory?
What did I say? The
Rat Factory.
Rat Factory.
Duck Factory. Yeah.
The Duck
Is it Duck
Factory.
Factory?
It's
Oh, my
Duck
bad.
Yeah.
Factory.
My bad.
There is a story
Rat.
about that too.
I watched it.
Did you?
The
but answer
whole
your
thing
question.
is based on Alan Burns' time at J. Ward.
Yeah.
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 So to answer your question, I've gone back to school to learn how to do better at writing, and to do better at some business. I've gone back to get my associates in general education just to. I've ran businesses before, an angel, I'm trying to get stuff going, but it's time to get back to school and get at least a degree. Like I said, graduating high school with the economy crashing kind of threw things off for a couple of years. Post this, I would love to start an on the road discussion talking about important places throughout the United States, important places
Jerry,
that aren't Los Angeles and New York that have some significance both for animation history and people throughout this country, that artists background or researchers. There's a lot to learn, and finding out about Winsor McKay and all of his, like, finding out how much he was related to my area, and realizing he was, spent time in Michigan and went around the Midwest, and it's very plausible he was in Fort Wayne, Indiana, showing off Gertie the dinosaur, like on stage doing it just over there. Has really kind of, it's invigorating to know it can happen. It too can happen here. So after the book, hopefully move on to, I'd love to be a presenter, in a sense, to bring more of, to be the preacher, if you will, the pulpit, bringing the good word of animation to the good people of the world. That's the long term. As far as the second edition, the first one's very out of date already. It's already about 1,300 books out of date. Jerry was kind enough to kind of push me to get it out the door. Otherwise, it never probably would have come out. The second edition, Kamden mentioned earlier, he's been working on some parts for it. I'm hoping to reach out to some other cartoon researchers and see if they would like to add any articles that talk about, like I alluded to earlier, just how significant and how long certain people have been looking at us. It offers a perspective that we don't necessarily have. And then lastly, because I keep adding more to it, because resources, it's, unlike a lot of other traditional studies of like film and stuff, animation has podcasts and videographies and all this. It's becoming more of an anipendium. Hey, we came up with a new word. The other one won't work. This one will. So I'm hoping to compile some patents. Kamden's been working on some websites, and of course the bibliography. I'm hoping to have one heck of a resource to launch this year. That it won't be perfect, but I'm hoping it'll be useful for people. And just like before, the information will be online, because that's the only way for people to keep pushing this forward, is if people have access to it. So
Cool. All right, and then we've probably said it 300 times during the show, but how do people find the list, and how do they get in contact with you?
Absolutely. You could find the Animation History Bibliography on cartoonresearch.com. It's at the top of the bar. If you want to read up on updates on the Cartoon Research Facebook group, I give periodic updates when I get to it. It's going back to college has taken a little bit more time away from me, but I've been working hard on an update coming up pretty soon. If you have any suggestions, at the bottom of any page, there's a link to a form that you can fill out for any suggestions or corrections or additions. But if you need to get a hold of me, you can always email me at animationhistorybibliography@gmail.com.
Wow. And then Kamden, what's up for
I
you?
just wanted
Curiosity
to say,
Shop Part 2.
I just wanted to say,
okay.
Jerry Beck posted a 10th anniversary post.
Right.
And he said on the bottom, he posted a PayPal thing. He says, so I can finally improve this blog and get thing. And I told Jerry privately, I'm like, improve it, but please don't forget about the little people like me.
Well, he's forgotten about me. I don't get my own column or anything. Anyway,
you didn't ask.
I have. Anyway, we'll not get into that. But anyway, what's next for you, Kamden?
I don't know. College.
Well, no articles underway. No research.
None at the moment.
You're satiated.
Yeah, I am.
You're quenched with
Yeah.
whatever brand that water is.
What is it? Oh, Deer Park, I
Deer
guess.
Park. Ew. I've been to the Deer Park when it was in LA. It was no, just kidding. That's an interesting total aside. Read about the deer park, the Japanese deer park they used to have, and it has an interesting ending. I'll leave it at that. So read up on that. So
I know we went to Japan in high school for a field trip, and we went to Nara, and in Nara the deer are domesticated, so they'll literally just come up to you and bow and wait for you to feed them. Just hand them food. They'll go through your pocket like.
Pickpocket you.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on, Mark.
All right. Well, on that note, on the Deer Park note,
Yeah, right.
yes, that'll be your next list, is come up with theme parks based on all these animation things. So, anyway,
There already is one. Didn't
There is
Tim
one?
Hollis write a book on this?
it's a book. I'm on a website. Anyway,
The
all right.
Animation Research Bibliography, The Park.
Yeah, the parks, plural. Anyway, so all right. Well, I guess that wraps it up for another episode of the Fun Ideas Podcast. We have Kamden Spies and Orrin Scott here, not related to Keith or Bill, or except for his dad, Bill. Anyway, and we will all see you next time and on another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast.